Dorkness Inc. and we're back, and we are going to do universal special rules. Stay tuned. We heard you. We believe you. We're going to do it. All right, so special rules. We've done all the basic rules. Now let's get into the special rules that make a difference. So first, special rules are rules that sit on top of the standard rules. So if a special rule says do it differently, that's going to supersede our standard rule. Generally speaking, your special rules are going to have the priority when it comes to resolving effects. We got a couple to get through. I'm trying to keep these under 10 minutes so I can keep them reasonable. Let's get at it. So aircraft. This one is a little different than all the other ones, so we're going to circle back to it. I may even do it as its own thing because aircraft is its own thing. But ambush. So ambush is a neat one. So instead of deploying this unit as normal, you hold it in reserves. In other games, they call it reserves. And this one, you just don't deploy them. This model gets one really powerful benefit with a little bit of a cost, or unit. So you don't deploy them, and any turn after the first, so after each player's gone through an entire sequence round, all the units have activated on both sides, and we've started round 2. You can, at any time you'd like in that round, place this unit on the board anywhere that's more than 9 inches away from an enemy unit. There are some rules that change this a little bit, but that's the general gist of it. This is such a powerful tool because it means that as long as you keep terrain in mind, you can drop them and immediately shoot your target, immediately charge your target. It's fantastic. The problem is that you only get them on round 2, and if you bring them in the last round, in round 4, then they can't hold an objective. So while it's powerful, it does limit their utility a lot. So something just to kind of keep in mind. All right, AP. So we mentioned AP a little bit during the shooting explanation, but let's really dig into it. So the way AP works is AP, and then it'll have bracketed, and it'll have a number with a minus sign, like -1, 2, 3, etc. What this means is that when a unit is taking a save against the weapon that has AP, that save is minused by that number. For example, if you roll a 3 and you have a 3+ armor save against a weapon with an AP of 1, that save is reduced by 1. So instead of rolling a 3, you've now rolled a 2 and you failed. Now, that's kind of a cumbersome way to look at it. So a lot of people, myself included, when I think about AP, instead of thinking about minusing from a defense roll, I prefer to think about minusing the save itself. So, for example, in that same example, you'd have your 3-up armor save, and your 3-up armor save becomes a 4-up armor save because you have lost a point of your save. And in that same one, you still rolled the 3 and you still failed. It works exactly the same. It just changes the way that you think about it because I find it cumbersome to think about minusing the saves as opposed to just making the save one step worse for each point. But that's just a school of thought about it one way or the other. So blast. Blast represents your missile launchers, your exploding energy from your thunderhammers, your bursts of power. And the way that this works is blast is another bracketed variable, so it's an X. And whatever that variable is, a 1, 2, 3, generally where you see them, an attack from this weapon, it ignores cover, so no cover bonuses to the saves, it's always fun, and it multiplies the number of hits that you score by the number in the bracket. So one success becomes, on a blast 3 weapon, one success becomes 3 successes. Although, you cannot deal more hits than the number of models in the unit. Now, what does this mean? So in practice and in trying to wrap your head around what this looks like in the simulated battle that you're doing, if you fire the rocket and it explodes and there's 10 guardsmen and you deal 11 wounds, they only make 10 saves. There's only 10 of them and each of them need to make a save for it. So in that same example, if there are 3 orcs and you hit them with the same rocket and you are successful 10 times, you multiply that by your 3. You've now been successful 30 times, but there's still only 3 guys to take the wounds. So each guy takes 1 wound. So it's not as effective when you're dealing with small units or units that are composed of single models. But once you get into the hordes, like your zombies, your bigger groups of units, the blast really helps crowd control with that. Next on the list is casters. We're going to circle back to that. I'm going to do one for the special rules that are a little more involved. Casters and aircraft so far. So we'll come back to that one. Hold tight. Trust me, it's better this way. All right, so counter. Counter is an interesting one. So generally speaking, if you remember our melee section, if you declare a charge, you get to hit first. That's super important because that gives you a huge advantage. Counter takes that advantage away. So a model with this weapon is charged. Instead of the charging unit getting the hit first, the model with counter gets the hit first. And if that's not bad enough, they also reduce the total impact attacks per model with this rule. So if you have 3 models with this rule, you reduce the impact attacks by 3. So that's fantastic. And we'll get into impact when we get to them. But essentially, this makes it so charging this unit is actually counterproductive. It makes it a very versatile way to handle an enemy charge. Now, deadly is kind of the flip side of the coin to blast, where blast affects lots of models lightly with no more than 1 each. Deadly affects 1 model many times. So, for example, deadly 3 is very common. So if you are fighting a model and it has toughness, let's say toughness 10, toughness 12, it's usually in increments of 3. So it has toughness 12, and you hit it 3 times with your deadly 3 weapon. Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to multiply that 3 times. 3 hits multiplied by the number of deadly in the variable, which is 3 in this case. That means you have successfully called 9 hits that this model now has to resolve. Now, those hits have to be resolved first, and once you've resolved all of them, if they have successfully killed the model that you hit with the deadly weapon, the excess, the wounds, or the hits past the number needed to defeat the model, do not carry over. So it can only ever remove 1 model, but it can remove many wounds from that 1 model. Entrenched. So enemies get a -2 to hit when shooting against models with this rule from more than 12 inches, as long as the model being shot has not moved since the beginning of its last action. This just represents that model hunkering down and being much more difficult to deal with if you're far away. Fast. Now, fast is where things get interesting, I think. So models with this rule get a +2 to their move when using advanced actions and a +4 when using rush or charge. So what this means is instead of moving up to 6 inches and still being able to fire, you can now move up to 8. And instead of being stuck at 12 inches to charge, you can now charge all the way out to 16 inches. This is an incredibly powerful ability because it allows you to manipulate and control the battlefield in a much more efficient fashion. Now, the inverse to this is also true. There's a slow, which does the exact opposite. -2 to move for advance, -4 to move for rush and for charge. This represents your stubbly little guys with the small legs who don't move very fast. Fear. Now, fear is another variable one. So what this does is you count as having dealt an additional number of wounds based on that variable to determine who won in melee. A couple of things to note. Someone has to have taken a wound in order to force the morale check in a melee. So somebody has to have taken at least 1 wound. And as long as they've taken at least 1 wound, then when you go to check melee to see who won, the fear unit will add that number to it. Now, on the other side of that coin, we have the fearless units. Now, those units, after they fail a morale test, they roll a dice. On a 4 up, they count as having passed. That's great for your really elite units who don't want to run away, and this gives them a 50% chance not to run away even when they have failed. Flying is a special rule. It lets you move through terrain and ignore terrain effects when moving. Essentially, if you think about it like you're thinking logically about it, you're above the ground. You just ignore the stuff as you go, just off into the distance. And we have Furious. Whenever a model with this rule charges, hits from an unmodified roll of 6, that's after re-rolls but with no other modifications, are multiplied by 2. But only the original hit counts as a 6 for this rule. So if you roll 3 attacks and you roll 6, 1, and 1, you get to double the 1 6 you did roll by 2. So you've dealt 2 wounds instead of 1. All right, so it looks like we're going to have to do a part 2 for the next part of this. This is Dorkness Inc. This is NinjaBot. Stick with us. We're doing great. We're almost done. Dorkness Inc. out.